We are hearing from several sources that Rupert Murdoch, I'm not sure whether it's a change of heart, but Rupert Murdoch is not set on selling to Disney. I think a lot of people have said not only is he focused only on selling to Disney, but he really wants Disney stock and wants to be a long-term owner and doesn't want cash. He doesn't want to pay the taxes. We believe that is factually incorrect and that Rupert, like his shareholders in Fox, are now fully aligned and simply want the best possible outcome, meaning the most dollars, whether that's cash and stock. He wants to maximize value and is not simply focused on Disney. So I think this is a real opening for Comcast to come in with a very significant premium bid to where Disney is now.
All right, so what would these assets do for Comcast specifically, Rich?
Well, look, it extends Comcast. Remember, they're the second largest distributor of video and broadband in the US. It gives them a clear path into the UK, Germany, and Italy, which are Sky's three big markets. It would give them an international footprint. If you think about NBC, it's really Comcast NBC is a pretty much a US landlocked company. They do not have a massive global footprint the way other media companies, even versus a Disney. Or, when you think about what Fox would do for Comcast, is it really makes Comcast NBC a significantly more global company. And I think when you look at the US cable business is slowing, look at what you've done signing your recent deal with YouTube TV. I mean, when you think about the challenges to the US video business, it's under a lot of pressure. So Comcast is looking to globally diversify as well as to increase their content creation. Their studio is much, much smaller than Disney. Disney's by far already the market leader. If Disney buys Universal Pictures, buys 20th Century Fox, with those two assets together would be roughly half of US box office. So it really puts Disney into a category that Comcast and Universal would never catch. If Universal, on the other hand, combines with Fox, then you have a real competitor from a movie standpoint with Disney.
Rich, let's stick on international. When it comes to these two companies battling it out for Fox's assets, how much of this is about Netflix? Because remember, of course, it was just a couple of years ago when Netflix flipped that switch and went live in almost every country around the world.
Right, CES a couple of years ago. And when you think about the growth now, the growth overseas is tremendous. And really, I think what is scaring all of these media companies is the rapid growth that you're seeing from Netflix. And so the question is, I think certainly from a Disney standpoint, they are set on buying Fox because they see it as their, basically the accelerant so that they can try to catch up with Netflix. I don't think that's Comcast rationale. I think for Comcast, it's diversifying away from their US business. I think it is growing their movie scale in the US. I don't think they have the same rationale as using this as a Netflix catcher, but I certainly think Disney does. Disney is looking at this as this is their best path to get data and to expand globally on the direct-to-consumer front.
And Rich, you mentioned some of the impact that this deal would have potentially to Comcast and to Disney. At the end of the day, for the everyday user, for the consumer of media, what are some changes that they would see if let's say, Comcast, first of all, were to win, and then on the other side, if Disney were to win out at the end of the day?
Look, I think if you're a consumer watching Cheddar right now and thinking about, does it matter who wins? Look, I think at the end of the day, you're probably betting on Comcast if you're a consumer. The reality is Disney combining all of Fox's regional sports networks as well as ESPN probably means that, cable bundles are going to get less flexible, meaning less chances of smaller, skinny bundles, and you're going to end up paying more for it. If Comcast wins, they don't have that ESPN sledgehammer that Disney has had for many years. And so my gut is that consumers probably from a pricing standpoint on their monthly bills are probably rooting for Comcast. That probably isn't what most people currently believe, but I think if you actually think about it from a consumer standpoint, you probably don't want one company having 50% of global box office. You probably want a more diversified movie business than Disney basically having every major franchise. So I think diversity probably is good for not just American consumers, but global consumers.
Rich, we're not talking about regulators at all in this conversation, and this comes amidst a backdrop of AT&T's acquisition of Time Warner's assets just being held up for so much longer than anyone anticipated. How does that change the conversation? I mean, is one of these companies better positioned for an acquisition because of regulatory approval?
There's been a kind of standing belief that Comcast is not liked by the government and that Disney is in a better position to buy these assets. And that's certainly, when you looked at the AT&T lawsuit, I think there was rationale. If you were sitting in Fox's shoes going, there's a vertical integration merger being challenged in AT&T Time Warner, choosing who to sell, I think it made sense back late last year to choose Disney as the buyer of Fox. With that outcome likely to come on Tuesday at 4 o'clock is when you're going to hear about AT&T Time Warner. Assuming AT&T wins and that merger is going to close, which I think not just we believe, but I think seems to be what the markets believe is going to happen. If AT&T ultimately wins, I think it really creates a very clear path for a bid from Comcast. But I want to caution, Tim, the reality is most of the government's case against AT&T Time Warner has been that it's national, that AT&T is national, that DirecTV is national, and that putting a national company together with content is problematic from an antitrust perspective. Comcast is not a national company. They're a regional player. So there is potentially still a very clear path for a Comcast-Fox merger to be approved by regulators, even if AT&T Time Warner is not approved.
And Rich, you mentioned that Murdoch doesn't necessarily care whether it's cash, stock, a combination of the two things. How much does this open up the bidding war? How fierce do you think the bidding war could actually get between Comcast and Disney?
Look, Comcast lost out on Disney, 17 years ago. When you look at from Comcast lost out on Time Warner Cable, they lost that asset because regulators blocked it and Charter ended up buying it. I think if you're sitting in Comcast shoes, from what I understand, this is a must win. They are not losing Fox. They are not losing Sky to Disney. They're in it to win it. The question is, how far is Disney willing to go? Does Comcast have partners that are going to help them from a balance sheet standpoint? I think that's a possibility. I think this is going to be a very, very exciting next month in media because you've got two very large companies and the last chess piece on the board is about to get removed. And the question is, who wants it more and who's willing to lever up the most to win?
And Rich, one thing that Comcast has that Disney doesn't have is access to people's homes through the pipes that actually reach people. How strong is Comcast's broadband business? And is there any threat right now that could actually be disrupted by 5G technology or some sort of other way to deliver internet? Because that's been something that Comcast has that others just don't, other media companies don't.
Look, I think Comcast is putting a lot of effort into building out wireless. They have an MVNO agreement with Verizon, and Xfinity Mobile has been a big, investment focus for the company over the last 12 months. Whether or not it ends up ultimately being disrupted, we'll see. I think, right now the biggest growth driver of Comcast has been their connectivity business, which is their broadband business. But look, I think, Tim, to answer your question, when you look at why is Comcast so interested in buying Fox and Sky, it's that their U.S. cable business is slowing. The growth is slowing, and they're looking to diversify. They have a lot of data on customers. They have a lot of customer relationships, which they can leverage. But look, I think one of the most interesting aspects here is that Disney isn't in the consumer business. They don't touch consumers the way Comcast does. The actual synergies, per se, when you think about a Comcast Sky transaction, are far greater than a Disney Sky transaction. Comcast knows how to run the Sky business. It's what they do every day. Disney's never run those businesses.